In the May 18 ban announcement, we got an oops nerf, so we reworked the sideboard, mostly the graveyard hate, to have more fair cross coverage. Nihil Spellbomb and Dauthi Voidwalker right now, but I could also see two Nihil Spellbombs. So I hope you already saw the deck tech video, which I spun off into a separate video because it got like 22 pages where I go over all the different grave hate options that I think are realistic. Now that oops is probably played less, so we can play not turn 0 or turn 1 on the draw interaction, but stuff that is stronger but comes later and has more overlap. And I'm also trying here Damping Sphere and Harbinger against more specifically lands and Tron. Could also be possible that 4 consigns are better against the colorless decks. Let's see. Check out the video of the deck tech if you haven't already, and now enjoy. All right, so I'm recording this after effect using the newly re-enabled replay system on my laptop. So please give me feedback if the sound quality is okay. I don't have the professional microphone here. And our opponent Lance in L has played a lot of Doomsday in the past. So this is really important. If you do a league and you can scout the opponent and you have a ponder hand, then it's really helpful to look them up. There are also some mixed hands where you have like a Force of Will and a Tamiyo or something and no Thoughtseize, where you don't have to do that and you're on the draw. Maybe you know what your opponent is playing, but especially with Ponder turn 1 on the play, it's really important to look the opponent up. So we already have the Tempo side of Tempo Doomsday covered. We are still assuming that with Snuff out. So we are interested in getting counter magic. So here it's important that we can grab a Force of Will. So we are interested in that hand. The question is in which direction we take it. So the problem is the Force is useless without the blue card. So if the opponent goes for a Thoughtseize at this spot, it's probably better if they take the Force and then we can jam into the Murktide Regent later and maybe we can bin the Brazen Borer. So I think it's best to stack it like this. So the Brazen, and then I think we should put the Force in hand. Yes, did I do it correctly? Yes. So now we pass the turn, and again, if we get Thoughtseized, then the Force, they should take the Force, and then but it's tropical island, so it's either like Bug Doomsday or it's something else. And so the opponent plays Tamiyo. So at this point, we're thinking, well, it's probably a control deck. So we still have a good hand against this. So we can go for Bowmasters and Snuff out, or we could also go for Wasteland, but I'm not a fan of Wastelanding here because of the unspent mana and because we specifically have the Force of Will. So I think I just Snuff out and main phase the Bowmaster here, hoping it's not something like Bug Tempo. And interestingly, it's an ancient tomb. So now our information gets weirder and weirder. So how do we puzzle this together? So first we thought it was Doomsday. Second guess like Control, and now Ancient Tomb. So it's maybe like Omni Show or Alluring Show with Tamiyo. So we should probably get rid of the wasteland so the opponent has less options to go for stock ups and show and tells, right? So we don't have enough cards here for the Murktide yet. Otherwise, it would have been really good to jam the Murktide Regent. So yeah, we go for the Wasteland on the Ancient Tomb. Opponent goes for Cunning Wish. So show and tell relatively confirmed. So we let that through. I mean, I was not completely sure because let's say they go for a Veil of Summer, which they do. Now we have to handle this, but it's better if we can counter the Veil of Summer than if we can. So they have to spend mana twice, right? That's what I meant here. And they have another Ancient Tomb and they go low. And now we can still not go for the Murktide Regent here, which is a bit annoying because we are really interested in clocking the opponent. I think it was a Ponder on top. Yeah, it was a Ponder on top. So what does the Ponder show? Brainstorm, Bauble, Tamiyo. This is really nice. So we can go for Tamiyo and flip her, but yeah, I say I shuffle, okay, and draw into the Tamiyo. Maybe this is wrong because I thought I would have kept it. But let's see what happens here. There's an eldrazi confluence, and I decide to let this through here. And now we can go for Murktide Regent and clock the opponent here using the 6/6. And here, I think at this spot, I wasn't really top concentration. I think I shouldn't have played this match at this time because I had little time, and I think I should just played it the next day because here the opponent goes for show and tell, and I'm going for the force, for the one ring. And I think it's incorrect to force it here because I know the opponent has Veil of Summer. So I think playing into the known veil is not really helpful. I think it would maybe have been better to keep the force for something more effective later. Yeah, I think there's because I knew the hand was Tamiyo, Brainstorm, and Bauble, and the here it says I'm shuffling the library, so I think this is maybe just wrong in the log. But now I have the problem that I'm against the one ring here, and interestingly, there's Ursa's Tower, so this deck is getting crazier and crazier. I think I missed playing the Brazen at this point, would have probably been better. But I played here, and the opponent is down to one from all the ancient tombs and my attacks, and then and the Bron ring, and I can just win with the Brazen here. All right, in game two, we have difficult sideboarding because the opponent has shown some Tamios, but not that many and not other tempo stuff. So I decide to take out all the three pushs and keep in one snuff, bring in one edict in case we need to get rid of Emrakul. Maybe you have some other suggestion. I also take out the daisies because the opponent probably brings in Carpet of Flowers, and I bring, of course, in the consigns against the Tron stuff, the Force of Negation against the rings and stock ups and show and tells, and Harbinger, and also so Harbinger, of course, great against the Tron stuff, can also be really strong against the manas in general, like the green mana if they don't have Carpet, and the dampening sphere against Tron lands. Okay, so yeah, on the draw, let's see. Opponent's deck not known for turn one combos. I mean, I guess it could happen with a pedal maybe, but I think not in this build. So opponent is representing here Veil of Summer, but we don't have another good play. So we just go for it and get rewarded. There is no Veil of Summer. We discard the show and tell here, pass the turn, and opponent doesn't really have much going on. So this is really good for us. But opponent has ancient tomb, so they could always top deck something, right? And I think this is a mistake here. I played a Dauthi Voidwalker, but I think I wasn't concentrated enough. You shouldn't play if you're not like completely dialed in. And the problem is, I know the opponent has really not a lot going on. And I know they can just now go for really, really good Kozileks Command for X equals 2. I mean, I could bluff having days, but the problem is they just don't really have any other option, right? So they just go for an easy K command, draw a card. Now they may have a force, and now I go for a brainstorm, turning on the flow state, and now I can play the flow state here, and I grab another flow state and Thoughtseize, so I just need to survive this turn, then I'm golden, but unfortunately the opponent in those two draw steps, I think it was, found exactly the one ring and also a blue card for the force. So now I'm in big trouble and I'm losing this game because, yeah, the one ring, if it resolves against blue-black, it's really, really hard to come back here. I mean, I have some stuff going on. So opponent is going for another one ring, so I can never really attack. There's the stock up, and now at least I have some stuff. I have Thoughtseize and Edict and Consign to Memory, but yeah, the opponent is now up so many cards. They go for Atraxa, so I go for Consign to Memory on the trigger. No, it's Show and Tell. Yeah, Show and Tell into Atraxa, and I don't have something to bring in. then they go for double omniscience. Yeah, so we double omniscience, stock up. And I mean, at this point, it's kind of trivial for the opponent to win. So they go for Atraxa. I double consign with replicate on the trigger and try to go for the edict, but it doesn't work. This gets forced. And I think at this point, it's just a formality. The game's just kind of over. Um, I'm not sure if I could have beaten it if I played correctly, but I think it was definitely a mistake at that point. Maybe I should just have went for the flow state, even if it wasn't turned on, to try to find a second force or something. But yeah, that's it for. And in game three, I decided to mix it up slightly. So I bought out two snuff outs and bring in two edicts. So I have some cross hate if they just go for show and tell Emrakul or have some other planeswalker. Or I could also kill Tamiyo once it's flipped, especially, yeah, this could be a big problem for me. And I think the hand is good. We are on the play, right? So now we can go for a Swordseize or we can go for Tamiyo. And I think pre-board, if I know the matchup, it's probably best to play Tamiyo here because they don't have a strong turn one. The problem is that they have carpet of flowers post-board. So I think it's better. But now I decide to go for the Tamiyo here, which I think in hindsight is maybe a mistake. But I mean, the deck has a lot of card advantage. So there's kind of, if they don't have the carpet, then the Tamiyo is probably much better. And I managed to see that the opponent has, unfortunately for them, only as a starting mana a hedge maze. And so there I can just wasteland them out of the game unless they find a new one. So I decide to take the stock up here because they have double carpet and waste the land. And I think I played slightly suboptimally here the next turn, where, I mean, of course, now I just want to race across the finish line before the opponent can stabilize, right? So I go for the brainstorm. And I think here I make a mistake where I go for underground sea. I think it would be better to go for the swamp so the opponent doesn't get as much mana, right? But I go for the double blue here, which I think in hindsight was incorrect because I played another golf. So I think there was no real downside. So I guess, again, I wasn't really dialed into this game. And now the opponent has a planar nexus, and yeah, I just try to finish it as quickly as possible. So I go for the Swordseize. I get back Swordseize to get rid of the carpet. So I just need one more turn or two more turns, so I can get rid of the second carpet as well. And again, yeah, just playing sloppy here. I should have played the Dauthi Voidwalker first. I don't really think I would have taken the sacrifice the Dauthi for a carpet, but it's just better sequencing, right? And the opponent did manage to catch up on turn four with the carpets, but at this point it's too little, too late. But yeah, if I lots of sloppy mistakes from me here, and I play just all my threats and try to kill the opponent as quickly as possible before they can stabilize. And I decide to go for the nether golf here, and I have the option to consign. And the opponent has three Kozileks Command and a confluence and not enough colorless mana. So yeah, I think this is a really experimental deck. So yeah, sloppy play from me, but fortunately was enough to beat this very strong opponent on an experimental deck. So let's go for match. And in match two, I'm playing against a known tempo player. So of course we have to mulligan this hand here because it doesn't have a land. So we have a triple wasteland hand on the draw. And I decide here that with a multi 5, I just have no chance to win against the day's wasteland tempo deck. So I go for the risky keep here of keeping the triple wasteland. So maybe you disagree. Maybe this was stupid. Maybe I should have gone to 5. But yeah, happy to see your input here. But I just thought maybe my only chance to win this game is to just waste the opponent out of the game. Opponent uses Mishra's Bauble on me and knows about the next card, I put back the Merc because this is too far away. So the opponent knows I have a force, and I go for the wasteland here. The opponent plays volcanic island, so probably has more lands, right? Because they expose it and probably doesn't have a one drop or cannot protect it. So now they go for Dragon's Rage Channeler. I have to force here because I cannot remove it. They have a Daze, which also accidentally saves the creature. However, they don't have Delirium yet, and I just try to get rid of the lands. And yeah, how many draws do I have? I think like 6 draws because it's on the draw, but in those 6 turns, I never draw a single land, and then it's kind of over at this point, right? So interested to know what you think, if I should have just gone to 5 or if it was correct. I mean, I did wasteland 3 times, but the opponent had 6 lands and I had no land drop drawn. So maybe this was correct, maybe not. But let's go to game number 2. So in game 2, we have a really nice starting hand. We can keep 7 now, and this is not the perfect configuration for blue-red, but it's very close. So I like having 20 lands, but I also like Nether Golf, and we always play Nether Golf with 19 lands. I also like having 4 Ponder, 3 Thoughtseize against blue-red, and we have the more combo-centered 4 Thoughtseize, or like more all-round for Thoughtseize 3 Ponder, but because we do have the Nihil Spellbomb and the Dauthi Voidwalker, we can just make a clean swap of taking out all the 4 forces and the 4 Thoughtseize for a full 8-card sideboard swap, and we bring in the 2 Hydros, the 2 Edicts, the 2 Barrow Golfs, and the 2 Graveyard Hate cards. I'm not sure how good the Voidwalker is, but it's probably still okay to run it. But I mean, it's weak to Wasteland because you need double black, right? And also weak to bold and so on. So I think in this matchup specifically, 2 Nihil Spellbombs would be better. But all in all, I think we have a pretty strong configuration against blue-red because we have just so much game about so much stuff. So here I have a difficult choice. In the vacuum, it's always better to go for turn 1 Tamiyo, but post-board, they have so much removal for it. They have like 4 lightning bolts and maybe a chain lightning and maybe like 3 pyroblasts. So the chance is so high that they can get rid of Tamiyo that I decide here to mate a turn, which is not something I like to do with Tamiyo, but I also don't really have a second threat. So it works out beautifully here because I can grab the opponent's Dragon's Rage Channeler, and I could brainstorm here, but again, if the opponent has Pyroblast, then it doesn't really do much. So this plays into Daze, but the opponent doesn't have Daze, and so I make this beautiful exchange here, going for the brainstorm to save Tamiyo. And the opponent's lightning bolt fizzles. So I'm up a card here, which is really, really good. And the opponent also has basic island, so they can't even pyroblast it this turn. So I managed to uptick Tamiyo, and I didn't get a clue, but it's still quite nice. And now we have the option to go for the wasteland here. However, then we play the Bowmaster into Daze, so we could also just pass the turn, but I decide, because I have Tamiyo, that it's better here to go for the Wasteland, and the opponent goes for the end of turn Brainstorm, and I managed to grab it with a Bowmaster, which is usually KO in those fair matchups, but it's very close here. So now I'm in a super, super strong position because the opponent now has to handle the Bowmaster, the 4/4 token, and the Tamiyo, and they start out with Pyroblasting and attack here. And I think it's correct to just play the Murktide here because then the opponent has more problems. However, it's only a 5/5, right? As we play it right now, and the opponent can make a 6/6. So I think I played unturned off flow state here and decide to hope for a better Murktide later. So here the problem is if the opponent has like double wasteland, they could maybe win the game still and Murktide or something. But the problem is like if they have a Murktide and a Pyroblast, then then they can protect themselves from the Brazen. So it's a difficult choice here. So if this flow state would be turned on, it would be the easy choice of Polluted Delta Edict. But I decide that having 3 lands is enough here, and I take the Edict. So I have one more option against the Murktide, and I do indeed get wastelanded. So again, I have a difficult choice here. And I do have a strong continuation of the 6/6 Murktide here. And I do have an important consideration here to make. I could go for basic swamp. So I'm at least somewhat stable to have 2 removal options for the Merc. If they have the days, then I can do it. And if I have 2 days, then maybe I lose the game. But the problem is I want to go for the Murktide, right? So I decide to go for the surveil land instead and hope to find another land with the surveil land and hope that they don't have another wasteland. So Bowmaster goes away because I'm just looking for lands at this point. And I think I go for the petty theft here because right now they're tapped out of red, so they cannot pyroblast it and they don't have days again. Opponent in a difficult spot, but they wasteland me here and make it very close, so I can bring the opponent to 1. But now I'm really interested what you think. Would you have gone for the basic swamp instead to prevent that from happening here or not? And the opponent goes for a 4/4 Murktide, the one I bounced before, right? So now I can just force the trade before they maybe get a second Murktide or something, or find some other method of increasing the size. And now it's really interesting standoff here where I do find a wasteland and manage to flow state into no lands, and opponent somehow cannot do anything, and I can finally ponder, and opponent goes for the bolt, and yeah, I think this was really close here. So opponent goes for another Murktide, and my ponder didn't find a land, so yeah, my mana base didn't cooperate. So I finally find a land here, use the polluted delta, and can go for the Schuld's Edict again. Fortunately, I don't get dazed, and now I just deployed another Golf, and the opponent surrenders here with my 6 cards or 5 cards with the opponent 1 card in hand. And like I nearly screwed it up. So yeah, interested to know if you would have played the same way, but I just thought, well, if I find a third land with the surveil land, I'm in a much more comfortable situation, but I ended up with 1 land instead. So maybe I should have played it safer because I was ahead, but let's go to. And we're in game 3, and we don't have a land again. And I think this match is a really good showcase of 2 things. The first one is that we motivated in the deck tech, the other video, right, where I went over now that Oops is nerfed, we maybe have the freedom of go for more cross hate against fair decks, which allows us here to keep playing the 4 Swordseize build, which is better against combo, but also board out all 4 Swordseize. So I think this mapping is really nice. And the second thing it motivates is talking about like statistics and math versus like subjective experience and sample size. So I could say, well, I just had so many games here where I didn't have colored lands in my starting hand, so maybe I should go up to 20 lands. But the thing is, I have played 19 lands for hundreds of games, and most of the time it works out, and you can also calculate the chance, right? So someone else maybe would say, well, I had 2 or 3 games where I had to mulligan, now I should add a land. But I mean, the math doesn't change. It was just variance, right? Sometimes you have those mulligans, sometimes you don't. There are a lot of stuff which you cannot easily calculate, but this is one of them with like the colored mana sources, right? If you have like 15 colored mana sources or 14 or 16 or whatever, depending also if you count like the surveil land or not. Okay, so we have to mulligan to 6 here again. And I decide to go for basic island because I also have the basic swamp already ready. This time here, I'm not going to keep up the mana because we don't have the hydroblast, right? So you may think, well, why didn't you do the same thing in game two? And the reason there was I had the hydroblast, so I had the potential to grab a Dragon's Rage Chandler or something else. And also, I don't have the brainstorm to save it one turn later, right? So there are often a lot of similar situations. I decide to daze here, even though that puts me 2 cards down, but it gives me the chance to get a clue, and I don't really have much else going on here. Opponent can now resolve a cutter, but doesn't have the bauble to go along with it. And now we can here go for the ponder, brainstorm, and land. And I kept it here because Brainstorm allows me to shuffle, to flip the Tamiyo, right? And also like find other stuff. But Tamiyo unfortunately gets killed before we can flip here. But we're a bit lucky that the opponent does not manage to double spell. So here I decide to pass the turn, which plays into days. But the idea is if there's a second Cory Steelcutter or a cantrip, the opponent is really incentivized to cantrip here. And I'm willing to take the risk of playing into days, um, that if it works out, I can maybe profit from the Bowmaster triggers. And I decide to respond to the second chorus deal. So if the opponent goes for the days and has it, then at least the second cutter doesn't trigger, right? Because that's the second spell. All right, so now they hit us at least for only one monk, and this is double cutter, super difficult to survive. So at least we find Murktide and Barrow Golf, and Murktide's always a bit difficult. So at least we find a Hydroblast to get it down to one cutter, which is easier. Opponent has a flow state, which is fortunately for us not turned on. And they go for the bauble, and we get hit here. And I decide to spend the snuff out before we are too low on life and cannot do it anymore, which makes us weak to Murktide. But I mean, we have another Murktide lined up, right? And we just have to hope the opponent doesn't have a way here to get rid of that. And I decide to keep the hand of the Ponder of Murktide 2 lands, which normally maybe would be too weak, because if they have a Pyro for the Murktide, we have 2 lands and no spells, but because we have the Clue token, I'm a bit more inclined to do it, but maybe you disagree. And also, it's possible that the opponent doesn't have a Pyroblast, in which case the Murktide will be really strong. Opponent has their own Murk, and in my opinion, they should have played the Bauble first and then taken out both Baubles with the Murktide to shrink my Barrow Golf by 1, because I don't have a Bauble, but maybe they have some other reason to do that. And my idea here is to just try if they go for a trade, because then I get rid of the Merc. And I mean, if I just sit back, they might have a removal spell for the Barrow Golf, and I just need to get my life total up. And I'm also really interested in wastelanding the opponent of the Volcanics here, so they have less of a possibility to double spell with the cutter or like find some removal, right? So now I'm wastelanding, and then I crack the clue token in my second main in case I find a bauble. And I also cannot bluff a bowmaster because I was empty-handed. So I think this is the best decision here. Opponent goes for a ponder and double spells with the Dragon's Rage Chandler here. And I have a turned on flow state, which is really strong. And I decide to use the underground seas. So in case I need to hold something up, the opponent cannot use the wasteland. So let's imagine the flow state finds, I don't know what, bowmasters, and the opponent goes for the wasteland. Um, so let's say I play Verdant Catacomb out, and the opponent wastelands me on Underground Sea, and then they go for Brainstorm on their turn. I play Bowmaster and they daze, and I tap the Underground Sea here, so I can instead not get wastelanded of 1 mana. So Tamiyo Underground Sea Wasteland, and I decide to keep it because I'm interested in wastelanding the opponent, and I'm offering the trade here. Again, opponent is tapped out of red, and I don't know if my Murktide will do anything, so I just prefer to just try to raise the opponent, and I have the Tamiyo as a blocker. I wasteland the Volcanic, and then I play the Tamiyo. So what's really dangerous in this spot is here that the opponent can use the Quarry Steel Cutter to equip Murktide Region, then it has Trample, then jump blocking doesn't do much, and there's indeed the Pyroblast on my Murktide Regent here. And so I'm happy I attacked for 7 here, because then the opponent cannot just all out attack and maybe needs to keep something back, right? So, but because I'm wastelanding, it's also hard for the opponent to either double spell or play a spell and also equip Murktide. So, or play maybe a double Murktide or something. And now I can play a fetch land, and I'm not sure. Maybe I should crack the fetch land here for the surveil land and then clue crack. So maybe I did it in an incorrect order here. I do find the hydroblast and decide to spend it right now. On the cutter, I could have done before blocking, but I think this would have not done anything. So maybe the opponent would have decided differently. So I think it's correct in this order. Now I get rid of the cutter, and yeah, maybe I should have went for the surveil before clue crack, but it's also possible that the clue crack would have found an important 2 mana card like a bowmaster or something, and then so there is pros and cons to each of those. Then there's a Prismari charm, which bounces the Bowmaster, which is a bit problematic because we are in a damage race, right? I go down from 17 to 8 here, right? Because I get hit and I go down to 7, but the opponent is empty-handed. And I have an interesting decision here with the surveillance because it shows a nihil spell bomb. And this is one of my favorite moves you can do against blue-red tempo, which I call like the fly trap, where you force the opponent to attack with Dragon's Rage Channeler. And then you, in the attack step, you can make it lose flying, and then you can jump block it with like Tamiyo just to survive, or you can kill it with the Orc Army token, or even gain a lot of life with Barrow Golf. The problem here is the opponent has, I think, 5 cards, instant and sorceries in a graveyard, so this will increase the Murktide by 5 power and only get rid of 3 power, but I do get 5 life. But I also draw a card, so I decide to keep it here and then just jump block the Murktide. So maybe you disagree with this play. I'm interested to know what you think. But I think if they find a bold, I'm dead anyways, and because of all my wastelanding, they also don't have that much options, right? Would, for example, be really difficult if they manage to chain a bunch of cantrips and then but they don't have the cutter anymore. But if they like find a cutter and equip it or something, or like flow state into cutter plus whatever and Murktide equip, but because they only have a single card, um, I don't think they can win here. But if it's a bold, I think I'm just dead, right? If the single card is a bold and I don't find a Hydroblast with the Nihil Spellbomb, then I can just get rid of the Tamiyo, and then they attack me for either 9 or but then they attack me for 11 and I go to 12. Maybe the bolt isn't even lethal here. Yeah, right? if they have it. And they go for a cutter, but fortunately they cannot equip because, yeah, I'm at 7 and I get 5 life if I block. It happens at the same time. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 11. Yeah. So I think a bolt does not kill. What if they bolt my face? Then I can just block Murktide with Tamiyo, right? So I think I'm relatively safe from everything. And here's the difficult spot where I decide to go for the fly trap because this allows me to gain 10 life over the course of 2 turns instead of 5. But yeah, I do have the problem of the Murktide next turn, but I decide to do it. This also makes like follow-up Murktides worse or unable to be cast, or like if they top deck a flow state or something. So yeah, we do that. We jump block, and the opponent's empty-handed now, so not much surprise going on here. So we get rid of that one. Go for the fly trap, and then I mean we can hopefully find another Tamiyo or something. So we do find a flow state, which is great here. And we find another wasteland and a Tamiyo. And I decide to not wasteland here because the opponent is empty-handed and instead play the nether golf to put the opponent dead on board. Probably, right? Because they go down to 4. So even if they keep back, they are just dead. But maybe I should have taken the wasteland to prevent like some crazy cantrip sequence like ponder into bolt, for example. Maybe in hindsight, yeah, I think in hindsight, maybe it would have been better to take the wasteland. And then, yeah, they cannot cantrip because cantripping is the problem with the cutter. Maybe that's better. Okay, and I decide to go down to 16 and play out all my stuff. And I think I should be pretty safe because they don't have active flow state. So what's the maximum they can do here to me? So let's say they brainstorm into a bolt on Tamiyo. The cutter tokens don't really matter because I can just block and gain life, right? So they have to deal 15 with Murktide Regent. And if they bolt Tamiyo, they cannot bolt face. So if they bolt Tamiyo, but this one, the monk token is prowess, right? Equipped. So I think they can only do 12 damage here maximum. And they go for preordain into concede. Yeah. So this was really interesting match. Yeah, I don't know if we did much. We had the Nihil Spellbomb here for the fly trap, but the Void Walker, I think, didn't do much. But yeah, I like this configuration just from the mapping alone. And I think having the Nihil Spellbomb available is really, really good because they can sometimes just win with chaining flow states and they really don't have many sorceries and you can shrink the Dragon Switch channelers and so on. Yeah, I really like this match. And let's go to the next. And in the next one, we play against famous Oops player Faulted Form. So it's a really interesting showcase for this deck, right? Because I mean, they don't always play Oops, but the question is if the opponent is still on Oops, do we just lose now that we don't have the surgicals anymore? Fortunately for us, the opponent goes super all in on an unprotected kill here, and the game is kind of over turn 1 and we just play Tamiyo instead of wasting because I think with one card the opponent cannot win. So it's really important against this deck to identify when you can like go shields down or not. After the fact, I realized the opponent could have top decked reanimate and won here if they play one of reanimate, but the chance like 2%. Maybe I should have respected this 2% and not played the Tamiyo and instead wasted. But on the other hand, in like 98% of cases, it's better. So debatable. But yeah, we win the first one easily. And we bought out all the removal stuff out. Orcish Bowmaster's Push. We keep in the Brazen because it's blue. We have to board in one Hydroblast just because it's blue. It doesn't do anything. Again, except maybe killing a hardcast Simian Spirit Guide. So I think this was a mistake. I should have brought in the Harbinger instead of the Hydroblast, yeah, because this can attack and block and maybe do something against the lands. So yeah, this was a mistake. Good that I go through the replay. Next time I just bring in the Harbinger. But yeah, it's just as a blue card for force. And we also bring out the Bowmasters because they don't do anything. And we bring in Force of Negations, the Consigns, and the Okay, sorry, I got the telephone call. Where was I? So yeah, for sideboarding, we bring in the Force of Negations, of course, Consigns, the Grey Fate, which is now a bit slow, the Nihil Spellbomb. So it's a really good use case to see how this works out. And we also play the Damping Sphere, so they cannot play multiple spells per turn because the combos like casting the Oops Creature and then Cabal Therapy and then Dread Return, right? So opponent takes our Swordseize. So we went for risky keep here. So not sure if this is correct, but I assumed the opponent would not have the turn one kill. So maybe this was wrong. I'm not sure. But I mean, because we don't have the turn one Grey Fate anyways, I just decided to risk it here and keep this hand because we only have the 6 forces as hits, right? And sometimes the opponent just goes for discard heavy hand. And they do manage to grab both of our ponders of the known information. We go for the Swordseize here. Of course, we always fetch for duels. And here, interesting spot, we see land and 2 rituals. And I decide to go for the ritual because it's +2 mana. And this deck is just about having 4 mana as quickly as possible, right? So now we can go for the flow state and we find Tamiyo and it was not turned on, right? We didn't have an instant. So now we take away Dark Ritual again. So opponent has Elvish Spirit Guide and Dark Ritual in hand. The last one, right? Or I clicked this one away on accident. And so we do have the force, there's the ritual, there's the unprotected spy, and we force. And the match is kind of over, but the opponent could still have reanimate. So it's important that we don't slack up here. We keep up the consign. Consign gets taken out, we wasteland, and I mean, reanimate could still do something, but we managed to take it down and go to the next. All right, in match 4, we play against lands here. We see that because we keep a multifunctional hand and we see Javi Maya, Cradle of Growth. So we go for basic land here and Tamiyo, and lands matchup is really bad, but we shouldn't surrender, but play 2 outs like quick Tamiyo ultimate. Opponent has the Caracas as well. So we use the time while it's tapped, try to get rid of our bad cards like Orcish Bowmasters. Opponent has Expiration, doesn't play another land. So Sherlock Curdy says, well, there must be 5 non-lands, and we managed to get rid of some of our bad cards. We still have a lot of bad cards in hand. And we go for the Swordseize and see 5 non-lands, but this is unbeatable. The only hope is to just go for a quick Tamiyo ultimate. We even go for the snuff out because just doesn't really have a target in this matchup on the token. But the opponent finds the Pithing Needle as well, and then we just have no chance, and we just get buried here in like Urza Saga. Opponent can also go for the combo. Yeah, so the first game is pretty much over and we lose soon after. So in game 2, for sideboarding, we're on the play and we take out all the removal as always and the Bowmasters because they're completely useless. Sometimes I bring in Barrow Golf, sometimes I bring in a Daze, but here we keep in the Daze on the play here, the single one, and we bring in, of course, the Harbinger, the Grey Fate stuff, and the Force of Negations, and the Consigns, and the Sheoldred's Edict, which are earmarked for the Marvet Large token. But maybe if the opponent plays some random creatures like Elvish Claymore or something, we can nab that too. And again, basic island, and we see a skateboard. We could also like set up a turn 2 Tamiyo flip with the bauble, but we have the brainstorm anyways. So we just rely on the brainstorm instead. Opponent plays live from the loam. I'm not going to daze it here because it only gets a single land and I don't really care about the maze right now. So we go for the brainstorm and we find Brazen, which is really nice protection against Marit Lash, right? And we also have Force of Will now and Swordseize. We go for Daze. We take the Disruptor Flute because this would stop Tamiyo, and it's better with the crop if we force the crop rotation, they use a land. But I mean, we can also wasteland, which is not that great of an exchange, right? Because I mean, the crop rotation gets forced, so we lose 2 cards, and but the wasteland doesn't really do much at this point. So I just passed. Well, I decide to do it here because I think I still do it here because if I pass the turn, eventually they can use the Thespian stage to grab to copy a basic land from us, and then we cannot use wasteland anymore. So it's like not great card advantage, but at least we get rid of the combo potential here. Tamiyo goes up to 6. We hope to find a blue card here. We don't force this one with the clue token, so we don't need to use the Brazen because the Brazen is like protection from if they manage to go for the token after all. And we do hit the force of negation. They don't go for the life on the loam, interestingly. And now we just have to survive for 1 turn, which using double negation, consigned barrow, Brazen looks great. And they concede here to the coming ultimate. Let's go to game. And in game 3, I decide to board out both copies of Days and bring in 1 Barrow Golf because sometimes I find it useful and I don't think Days on the draw against lands does much. But in Barrow Golf is also kind of niche, but sometimes you can like get over 20 and survive a Marit Lash hit or something. And this time I go for the Swordseize instead of starting with Tamiyo and take one of the crop rotations here. And opponent has a lot of lands, but they don't really do anything. So opponent goes for the crop rotation, which we force using the ponder as pitch card. So we still have the brainstorm to flip Tamiyo. And now we flip Tamiyo and we just pass the turn here. Maybe I should have kept up the wasteland because the opponent could have both cards, right? Yeah, I think this is maybe a mistake. If the opponent draws both Dark Depths and Thespian Stage, naturally they can play both, right? So, but here I can go for the surveil land, but I decide against the flow state and just play the barrel golf. And now we have 2-pronged attack here. I mean, we have to pay mana for the barrel golf, but getting above 20 lives, really nice insurance, and we can go for the ultimate soon. And the opponent concedes. So this is not typical. Usually I lose 2 lands, especially if we don't draw the Harbinger. But it's nice. If we play tight, we can sometimes win the matchup if we go for the right stuff, right? Quick time your ultimate, counter the right stuff, prevent the Marit Lash or like bounce it or edict it, and can sometimes win. So not worth it giving up, but we can still try and hopefully win sometimes. And now we have the last coming up. All right, and for the last one, we have a really interesting one, which I don't see often, which is Turbo Depths. So we can go for Tamiyo, but we lose to Wasteland here. So we ponder instead trying to find basic island because we don't want to instantly lose here. Little do we know it's Turbo Depths where I'm really unsure what stuff they play. Like, do they play Wasteland? Do they play like Graveyard Recursion? And I think they don't really play much of that. It's more of a combo deck. They have Urborg and Talon Gates, and we managed to flip Tamiyo here after attacking for the clue, of course, and then we, they do get in Disruptor Flute, unfortunately. So the Tamiyo doesn't do anything, so we get rid of the Vampire Hex Mage, and yeah, the opponent tries to go for the combo, but we do have the Brazen here. And fortunately, we are beating down with the Nether Golf, but really, really slowly. And we manage to wasteland the Dark Depths here and just beat the opponent down, get rid of all the useless cards with Brainstorm and Shuffle, and the opponent surrenders, and we manage. All right, in game two, for sideboarding, I boarded the same against land as against lands because I'm really unsure about the matchup, what they play specifically. I think they may not play much graveyard recursion, so maybe we didn't need the Dauthi Voidwalker and the Spellbomb. Unfortunately, we have to go to 5 here because we have 2 non-landers, and we have to go down to 2, and the opponent sword seizes us twice using a pedal, stranding us with like nothing except 4 lands. So the game is, it's at least the rest does nothing, right? And we get sword seized the rest again, and we just have a single Nether Golf trying to go the distance. And yeah, the game is kind of over at this point because the opponent just goes for the Maritlage, protected by Petrified Hamlet. And we do have the Force and the Wasteland, but we were 1 turn too late, right? So if we had 1 mana more, we could have um, forced the crop rotation and then wastelanded the Hamlet, or was it the no, we could have wastelanded the Dark Depths or the stage with the Hamlet trigger on the stack and then force of the crop rotation. But with 1 turn, with just having 5 lands, that was kind of checkmate here, and we go to the next. And for the last one, we correct slightly here and board out the Nihil Spellbomb and Dauthi Voidwalker again. And we have a nice hand here with Tamiyo and Swordseize. Because of the force, I decide to not go for the Swordseize here and start with the Tamiyo instead. Then our Swordseize gets Swordseized. Opponent plays Petrified Hamlet. So we use the Wasteland with the trigger on the stack. Opponent goes for crop rotation. We go for Force of Negation. And now we can chain flow states here for a little bit, hoping to find another blue card, which we do. Now we are attacking here. Opponent clears our graveyard, but at this point we don't really care that much. We find another flow state here, and we crack the clue token because the flow state is not turned on. Fortunately, we managed to crack into a Force of Negation, which is really important because the opponent plays a Vampire Hex Mage, so we can force it. There's the Dark Depths that the opponent could have created, could have went for the combo at this point, and then we would have needed to like play the Tamiyo as a jump blocker and try to flow state, trying to find a removal, but we are in a comfortable position where we just force the Hex Mage, play the Harbinger, and the game match and league is over. We go for the trophy. Really like the deck. Maybe in your meta, you can maybe go for 4 consigns instead of Harbinger and the damping sphere. That's more experimental, what I'm trying right now. So if you go for a challenge, maybe stick with the trial and true 4 consign. But I like the Nihil Spellbomb, and I think the Dauthi Voidwalker is also nice, but you can also go for a second Nihil Spellbomb. So hope you liked it. See you later.